Drake wore their colors for 46 million followers. Jason Momoa hired them as his personal bodyguards, and a Fox News host stood up at the funeral of their most famous leader and called him a hero.
Why aren't we hearing that from the people who run the country? Why is it left to Sonny Barger to say, stand tall, stay loyal, remain free, and always value honor? The President of the United States should be saying that every single morning as he salutes the flag, but only Sonny Barger is saying it.
The Hells Angels and the clubs like them are among the most feared outlaw organizations on Earth. You would expect famous people to keep their distance, but instead, some of the most recognizable names alive have been pulled into their orbit. Some only flirted with the image, but a few wore the patch for real. These are the celebrities with documented ties to biker clubs. Hunter S. Thompson. Hunter S. Thompson got into the Hells Angels through a man who had once worn the patch himself. Bernie Jarvis was a former club member who had become a police beat reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle, and it was that rare bridge from inside the club that allowed Thompson, then a young and largely unknown writer, to get close in a way an ordinary reporter never could. He was upfront with the Angels about being a writer, a genuinely dangerous move given the club's deep distrust of reporters, and he spent the better part of a year riding alongside the San Francisco and Oakland chapters, drinking with them, and documenting a subculture the rest of America only knew through tabloid panic. The book that came out of it, Hells Angels, A Strange and Terrible Saga, launched his entire career. But Thompson was never a member, and he never pretended to be one. He understood the rules of the world he had been led into, including the brutal internal logic that governed it. In an interview with Studs Terkel, Thompson explained that the club had a bylaw stating that when one angel punches a non-angel, every other angel joins in, and he eventually became a victim of that exact rule. He kept a loaded double-barreled shotgun on the wall of his home, and when jokingly threatened with violence, he replied in kind that he would take 2 of them with him first. In the end, the relationship collapsed the way it was always going to. During a Labor Day gathering in Mendocino, Thompson watched a member known as Junkie George beating his wife and then his dog, and Thompson said the one thing the moment pulled out of him: only a punk beats his wife and dog. Several angels turned on him and delivered what he described as a savage stomping, a beating bad enough to send him to the hospital, which stopped only when senior members ordered it to end. There is a lasting debate about that beating. Sonny Barger, the legendary Oakland chapter president, and others have suggested over the years that Thompson partly invited or even staged the ending because it gave the book a perfect dramatic finish. Thompson himself later noted that the men who beat him were not the ones he had been closest to, and despite everything, he remained oddly fond of Barger for the rest of his life, writing about him admiringly years later in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. The year embedded with the club ended with Thompson on the ground, which was its own kind of proof of the distance between writing about that world and belonging to it. Drake. In August 2018, a photo went up on Travis Scott's Instagram showing Drake sitting beside him in a dark hoodie. Across the chest it read Toronto, and beneath that was a circular logo with the words "Support Downtown Big Red Machine" and the number 81. To most of the millions of people who liked the photo, it meant nothing. But to anyone who knew the codes of the outlaw motorcycle world, it was unmistakable. Big Red Machine is a nickname for the Hells Angels, drawn from their red and white colors. And 81 stands for the 8th and 1st letters of the alphabet, H and A, Hells Angels. The hoodie was support gear, the one that club sells to the public through shops like Route 81 Toronto, and Drake was wearing it for 46 million followers to see. The reaction from law enforcement was immediate. Anti-gang units in British Columbia and Ontario publicly criticized him, and one officer called him a walking billboard for the Hells Angels and said that was exactly what the club wanted. The concern they kept returning to was that support gear is not harmless. The money from it feeds the club's legal defense fund, and the visibility launders the club's image, turning a criminal organization into something that looks almost like a streetwear brand when a global superstar wears it. What made it more than an accident was Drake's own response. When the photo drew attention, He commented on it himself with the words, "Wow, VVV Rare 81 Crashers." The number 81 also appears in his song God's Plan, in a line about 81 bringing the Crashers to the party. Taken together, it suggested the reference was deliberate rather than a stylist's mistake. Drake knew what the hoodie said, but there is no evidence that Drake has any actual relationship with the Hells Angels, and wearing support gear is completely legal and available to anyone. Tucker Carlson. In September 2022, the Fox News host Tucker Carlson stood up at a funeral in Stockton, California, and delivered a eulogy. The man in the casket was Ralph Barger, known to the world as Sonny, the longtime president of the Oakland Hells Angels, and the man who had turned the club into a global organization. Around 7,000 people attended, most of them bikers and Hells Angels members. And there, in a blue button-down shirt and chinos, was one of the most recognizable conservative media figures in America, paying tribute to the most famous outlaw biker who ever lived. Carlson did not hide his admiration. He recited what he called Barger's personal credo: stand tall, stay loyal, remain free, and always value honor. He asked the assembled bikers whether there was a phrase that summed up more perfectly the kind of man he aspired to be. Then he turned it political, saying that the President of the United States should be reciting those words every morning as he saluted the flag, but that only Sonny Barger had said them. He told the crowd he had cleared his schedule and traveled across the country because he wanted to pay tribute to the man who spoke those words. The contrast was hard to ignore. Carlson was the son of a media executive, married into the Swanson frozen food fortune, privately schooled in Rhode Island, and educated at a liberal arts college in Connecticut, while Barger had spent a large part of his life in prison and led an organization that the United States Department of Justice links to organized crime. The eulogy drew immediate criticism, with commentators questioning why a mainstream news host would hold up the leader of an outlaw motorcycle club as a role model. But Carlson was never tied to the Hells Angels in any criminal or formal sense. He was there as an admirer, drawn to Barger the same way writers and rock stars had been drawn to the club for decades. Jason Momoa. In 2023, while filming Fast X, Jason Momoa hired the Hells Angels. 50 years earlier, the Rolling Stones had done the same thing, putting the club in charge of security at Altamont, and it had ended with a man stabbed to death. Momoa brought them on for the opposite reason: to protect him. He wanted them to keep the paparazzi away, and it was not a one-time arrangement. When the production moved to Rome, Momoa was photographed being escorted through the city by members of the Hells Angels Eternal City Charter, guided around the Giardino degli Aranci and the streets of the capital by some of the most feared bikers in Italy, while he tried to enjoy the city between takes. Momoa could afford the protection because he is one of the biggest stars in the world. But he has always insisted he does not feel like a celebrity at all, telling interviewers he is the same person he was before fame found him. But Momoa's connection to motorcycle clubs runs deeper than a security contract, and it points in a very different direction from the Hells Angels. Momoa has been reported to be a patched member of Red Rum MC, an indigenous-led motorcycle club, and he has worn the club's cut publicly for years, including at the premiere of The Bike Riders and in a tribute woven into the final scene of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Red Rum MC is not an outlaw organization and not a one-percenter club. It is built around indigenous heritage, brotherhood, and community service. And Momoa's involvement reflects his pride in his own Hawaiian and indigenous roots, rather than any tie to criminal biker culture. Momoa's allegiance as a rider belongs to a very different kind of club, one whose patch stands for heritage rather than fear. Danny Lyon. A few years before Thompson's book reached the shelves, a young photographer named Danny Lyon was doing something similar with a camera instead of a typewriter. In the mid-1960s, Lyon actually joined the Chicago Outlaws Motorcycle Club as a member so that he could photograph them honestly, riding with them and living inside their world rather than pointing a lens at them from across the street. He was there as a documentarian, but unlike Thompson, he was patched into the club for the time he spent with them, which gave him a level of access almost no outsider has ever matched. The photographs he took during those years became the book The Bike Riders, published in 1968. It was not a sensational account, and it was not built around crime or violence. It was a close and human record of who these men actually were, the way they dressed, the way they rode, the way they talked to each other when no journalist was supposed to be listening. Lyon captured the texture of the club from the inside because for a period of time, he genuinely was on the inside. That book went on to outlive almost everything else from the era. Decades later, it became the direct inspiration for the 2024 feature film of the same name starring Tom Hardy and Austin Butler, which introduced an entirely new generation to images that a young photographer had taken while riding with the Outlaws 60 years earlier. Lyon eventually moved on to other subjects and became one of the most respected documentary photographers in America. But his connection to that club was real, and the work he produced from inside it is the reason the world remembers what that particular corner of the 1960s looked like. Mickey Rourke. By the 1980s, Mickey Rourke was one of the most talked about actors in Hollywood, coming off films like Diner, Rumble Fish, and 9½ Weeks. But Rourke had a reputation for living closer to the characters he played than most of his peers, and part of that reputation came from the company he kept. He was an avid motorcycle rider, and over the years he was repeatedly seen and photographed in the company of Hell's Angels. It is important to be precise about what that connection actually was. Rourke was an associate and a friend to people in that world, not a patched member of the club. In 1987, a Wire report described him partying with outlaw bikers, and over the following decades, he never hid his affection for the lifestyle or the people in it. He rode the bikes, he wore the look, and he spent real time around members of one of the most notorious clubs in the world. That is a documented association, and it shaped the public image of an actor who already seemed to belong more to the street than to the studio. What makes Rourke an interesting case is the direction of the relationship. Thompson and Lyon came to the clubs as observers who wanted to document them. Rourke came to them as a fan of the life who happened to have a movie career, a man drawn to that world for its own sake rather than for a book or a film. He never claimed a patch he had not earned, and he never pretended the friendship was something more official than it was. But the connection was genuine, and it was one of the reasons audiences struggled to tell where the actor ended and the outlaw image began. Justin "Mooch" DeLoretto. With Justin DeLoretto, the list crosses a clear line. The people up to this point either observed the biker world, associated with it, or in Coe's case, wrapped themselves in a mix of fact and legend. DeLoretto was the real thing, a patched and ranking member of an outlaw motorcycle club for years before he ever became any kind of public figure, and his fame came afterward, built largely on telling the story of the life he had actually lived. DeLoretto, known by the nickname Mooch, was described by both police and federal agents as a founder of the Mongols Motorcycle Club's Oregon chapters and served as a chapter president. The Mongols are one of the most formidable 1% clubs in the United States, a longtime rival of the Hells Angels, and DeLoretto was not a hanger-on at the edges of it. He carried the patch, he held rank, and he had the club's insignia tattooed on the side of his head, which is not a commitment a person makes lightly or temporarily. His years inside that world were not quiet ones. In 2008, he was arrested in Oregon after an incident in which 2 biker gang investigators, a federal ATF agent and a Eugene police detective, had driven to his rural Turner home as part of a separate assault investigation. DeLoretto was accused of then following them roughly 90 miles, including a stretch along Interstate 5 during rush hour, in an attempt to run them off the road. He was convicted of 5 misdemeanor charges, including reckless endangerment and menacing, though he was acquitted of 8 felonies, and he was handed a rare court order barring him from associating with the Mongols or displaying their insignia, a restriction made almost impossible by the logo permanently inked on his head and complicated further by the fact that his own twin brother was at the time an acting Mongols president. That same year, DeLoretto found himself swept up in something far larger. In October 2008, the ATF executed Operation Black Rain, one of the biggest law enforcement actions ever taken against a motorcycle club. It was the culmination of a 3-year undercover investigation in which federal agents had actually become patched Mongols members, and it ended with pre-dawn raids across 7 states, 79 defendants indicted under federal racketeering law, and an unprecedented government attempt to legally seize the club's own trademarked patch. DeLoretto was detained when agents raided a San Diego tattoo parlor tied to the club. What makes him a public figure today is what he did with all of that history afterward. He left the club, wrote a book about his life called Ride of My Life, and reinvented himself as an author, a podcaster, and a voice on the realities of motorcycle club culture, even pursuing work aimed at steering young people away from the path he had taken. That second act did not come without friction. He was reportedly drawn toward youth intervention work and at one point lost an internship with a youth authority when the agency discovered his documented club past. He has appeared as himself in documentary projects about the Mongols, sitting alongside former club leaders and the very kind of law enforcement figures who once pursued him. His public profile exists precisely because his membership was authentic. He is not a famous person who happened to brush against a club. He is a former outlaw who became known for telling the truth about that world from the inside. Steven Seagal. Steven Seagal built his fame in the late 1980s and 1990s as an action star, a martial artist who turned his Aikido background into a long run of films where he played quiet, lethal men who solved problems with their hands. But in the years since his Hollywood peak, Seagal's most notable associations have moved a long way from the studio lot, and one of the more unusual of them connects him directly to an outlaw motorcycle club. Not an American one, though. A Russian one. The Nightwolves are Russia's largest and most influential motorcycle club, founded in the final years of the Soviet Union and grown over the decades into something far more than a riding club. They are closely aligned with the Russian state and with President Vladimir Putin personally, and they have taken on an openly nationalist and political role that sets them apart from the American clubs on this list. Seagal, who was granted Russian citizenship by Putin in 2016 and has become one of the most prominent Western supporters of the Russian government, has publicly associated himself with the Nightwolves on multiple occasions. He has performed concerts connected to the club, including appearances in Crimea after Russia's annexation of the peninsula, and he has been photographed alongside Nightwolves' leadership at events that carried clear political weight. His relationship with the club is not the relationship of an outlaw biker to his brothers. It is the relationship of a celebrity ally to an organization that functions partly as a motorcycle club and partly as an instrument of Russian soft power. That makes Seagal's tie genuinely different from everyone else here. Where the American figures on this list were drawn to clubs built around brotherhood and rebellion against mainstream authority, Seagal aligned himself with a club that has wrapped itself around state authority rather than against it. The patch means something very different on that side of the world, and Seagal's connection to it says as much about his politics as it does about any love of motorcycles. Brandon Hantz. Most of the people on this list became famous first and brushed up against the biker world second. Brandon Hantz is a rare case where the two stories are tangled together in a way that is still being decided in a federal courtroom. He first became known to the public as a contestant on the long-running CBS reality show Survivor, where he appeared twice. He was 19 years old during his first season, Survivor, South Pacific in 2011, and he returned for Survivor, Caramoan the following year, where an on-camera emotional breakdown turned him into one of the more infamous figures in the show's history. He is also the nephew of Russell Hantz, one of the most notorious villains the series ever produced, which kept the family name in front of fans for years. What put Brandon Hantz on a list about outlaw motorcycle clubs came much later and is far more serious than reality television. In February 2025, The United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Texas unsealed a 22-count federal indictment charging Hantz and 13 other people described as members and associates of the Bandidos outlaw motorcycle gang. According to prosecutors, the charges stem from a violent turf war that began in 2019 between the Bandidos and a rival Houston motorcycle gang, a conflict in which the Bandidos' leadership allegedly issued what investigators called a smash-on-sight order, instructing members to assault and even kill members of the rival club. It is essential to be precise about what Hantz has and has not been accused of, because at this stage, these are allegations that have not been proven in court. Hantz, who allegedly went by the nicknames Loco and Gundrop, was not charged with murder. He faces 2 specific counts: 1 count of conspiracy to commit racketeering activity and 1 count of arson, the latter tied to allegations that he set fire to a bar called the County Line Ice House in December 2023. Several of his alleged co-defendants face far graver charges, including murder and attempted murder. If convicted on his own charges, Hantz could face decades in federal prison. That distinction matters. Hantz has been indicted, not convicted, and an indictment is an accusation rather than a finding of guilt. But the case places a former network television personality squarely inside a federal racketeering prosecution against one of the largest outlaw motorcycle organizations in the world. And it is one of the most recent and most striking examples of how thin the line can sometimes be between a famous face and the world these clubs operate in. David Allan Coe. For most of the people on this list, the connection to the biker world is a chapter in a larger story. For David Allan Coe, it was woven into the entire myth of who he was, to the point where it became almost impossible to separate the documented facts from the legend he built around himself. Coe was one of the founding figures of the outlaw country movement of the 1970s, the songwriter behind hits like "Take This Job and Shove It and You Never Even Call Me by My Name," a heavily tattooed, long-haired performer who looked and lived more like the bikers in his audience than like a Nashville recording artist. When he died in April 2026 at the age of 86, the obituaries had to grapple with the same problem that had followed him his whole life, which was figuring out where the truth ended and the legend began. Coe was born in Akron, Ohio, spent much of his youth in reformatories, and served time in an Ohio prison from 1963 to 1967 for possession of burglary tools. He recorded his first album, a blues record called Penitentiary Blues, using songs he had written behind bars, and he arrived in Nashville afterward so broke that he lived for a time in a hearse parked outside the Ryman Auditorium. Multiple sources, including standard biographical references, place him as a member of the Louisville, Kentucky chapter of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club, one of the oldest and most powerful 1% clubs in America. For a man whose entire artistic identity was built around being a genuine outlaw rather than a costume version of one, that membership was central to the image. But Coe is also the clearest example on this list of how this world breeds exaggeration. Even his own obituaries noted carefully that he said he spent time with the Outlaws, and that many of the tales about his prison years and his personal life had been wildly exaggerated over the decades. The most notorious of those tales was his claim that he had spent time on death row and had even killed a man in prison, a story that was later debunked. He leaned into the darkest version of his own legend in other ways too, recording 2 so-called underground albums in the late 1970s and early 1980s, filled with racist and sexually explicit material that he sold directly through biker magazines, music he spent years afterward trying to explain away. The final irony is that the most rigorous dismantling of the David Allan Coe myth came from inside his own family. His son, Tyler Mahan Coe, became a respected music historian and created the acclaimed podcast Cocaine and Rhinestones, where he examined country music's legends with a researcher's eye, including the inflated stories his own father had told. So with Coe, the honest answer is that the Outlaws' connection appears to be genuine, supported by more than just his own word. But it sits inside a life story where the line between fact and performance was deliberately blurred by the performer himself. That blurring was not a flaw in his image. It was the image, and it makes him one of the most fascinating figures on this list. Cher is one of the most recognizable entertainers in the world, with a career spanning music, film, and television that has lasted more than half a century. She is not the kind of name most people would expect to find on a list about outlaw motorcycle clubs. And her connection to that world is the most indirect of anyone here. It runs through the men in her life, rather, than through any patch she ever wore or any club she ever rode with. The biker association attached to Cher comes largely through her long history with motorcycle culture and the partners she has been linked to over the years, including her well-documented relationships with men deeply embedded in the rock and motorcycle worlds of the 1970s and 1980s. Cher herself has always been drawn to that aesthetic. The leather, the bikes, the outlaw imagery became part of her own visual language as a performer, most famously in her 1989 music video for If I Could Turn Back Time, which was filmed aboard the USS Missouri, surrounded by sailors but leaned heavily on exactly the kind of leather and chrome iconography that the biker world had made famous. So Cher belongs on a list like this only with a careful caveat. She was never a member of any club, and she was never an associate in the way that someone like Mickey Rourke was. Her tie is cultural and personal, rather than organizational. But she represents something real about how deeply this world bled into mainstream entertainment. Because even an artist operating at the absolute center of pop culture found herself orbiting it through the people she loved and the imagery she chose to perform. The fact that the connection is thin is itself part of the point. The biker world reached far enough into American celebrity that it touched even those who only ever stood at its edges. David Labrava. If you have ever watched Sons of Anarchy, the FX drama that became one of the most popular television series ever made about an outlaw motorcycle club, then you have already seen David Labrava. He played Happy Loman, the quiet and genuinely frightening enforcer who tattooed a smiling face on his body every time he killed someone. What most viewers did not know while they were watching is that the menace Labrava brought to that role was not entirely an act. Before he was ever cast, he was a real member of the Hells Angels, and the show hired him precisely because of it. Labrava was born in Miami in 1962 and raised partly in Europe, working as a tattoo artist and a bouncer in Amsterdam before returning to the United States and settling in Oakland, California, the spiritual home of the Hells Angels. He opened a tattoo shop called Evil Ink directly across the street from the Oakland clubhouse, and he became a patched member of the club. He was also a writer long before Hollywood came calling, contributing columns to motorcycle and hot rod magazines for years. When the creator of Sons of Anarchy, Kurt Sutter, set out to make a series about an outlaw motorcycle club, he understood that authenticity could not be faked. So he brought Labrava on as a technical advisor to make sure the show got the details of that world right. The advisor role turned into something much bigger. Labrava had a conversation with Sutter, explained that he was also a writer who wanted a shot at acting, and was cast as Happy. He stayed with the show from its first season in 2008 to its finale in 2014, and he reprised the role in the spin-off Mayans MC. He did not just act either. He co-wrote a fourth season episode titled Hantz, which earned an honorable mention from Time magazine, the only episode in the show's 7-season run to receive that kind of recognition. Off-screen, he wrote a best-selling autobiography called Becoming a Son, directed and starred in his own feature film, and continued his work as an artist. Labrava is the embodiment of what made Sons of Anarchy feel so real to so many people. The show did not just hire actors to play Hells Angels. In Labrava's case, it hired an actual Hells Angel to play one, and the line between performer and subject all but disappeared. Rusty Coons. David Labrava was not the only genuine outlaw biker that Sons of Anarchy brought into its cast, and he was not even the highest-ranking one. That distinction belonged to Rusty Coons, a towering figure at 6'5" who played the Nomad chapter president Ronnie Quinn on the show. The role was almost absurdly well suited to him, because in real life, Coons was a founder of the Hells Angels Orange County chapter and went on to serve as president of the club's San Fernando Valley chapter. When the show needed someone to play a chapter president of an outlaw motorcycle club, it cast a man who had actually been one. Coons, born Howard Coons, came to the club through a life that ran straight through the heart of California, motorcycle culture. He built custom bikes and muscle cars for a living and eventually opened his own shop, Illusion Motorsports, whose customers included the creator of Sons of Anarchy himself. That connection was how he ended up on the show. Coons built a motorcycle for the production and then for Sutter personally. The cast and crew got to know him, and the offer to appear followed naturally. His path into the club also came with a serious cost. In 1999, he was caught up in a major federal drug investigation targeting the Hells Angels and ultimately pleaded guilty to a conspiracy charge connected to the supply of a chemical used in manufacturing methamphetamine, a case that sent him to federal prison. It was during that time inside that he turned seriously to music, writing the songs that would later fill the catalog of his band. That band was Attica 7, a heavy metal group Coons founded after his release, and its songs were featured on the Sons of Anarchy soundtrack before he ever appeared on camera. So Coons arrived on the show as a triple presence, a real club president whose music was already part of the series and whose bikes the creator personally rode. He later reprised the Quinn character on the spin-off Mayans MC as well. Like Labrava, Coons represents the show's deliberate strategy of blurring fiction and reality, but he sat even higher up the real-world hierarchy. A man who had genuinely held the rank his character only pretended to hold. Kid Rock. Kid Rock built an entire career on the image of the outlaw. Born Robert James Ritchie, the son of a wealthy Michigan car dealership owner, he remade himself in the late 1990s into America's self-styled badass, the cowboy and the rebel, with hits like American Badass and Cowboy. The persona was so complete that it became easy to assume the man behind it actually lived in the outlaw world he sang about. The reality was more modest, but it was not nothing. His real documented connection to that world came through the man standing next to him. For years, one of Kid Rock's bodyguards, known as TA, was a member of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club, the storied rival of the Hells Angels. In a 2002 interview, the bodyguard sat in on the conversation, spoke up to defend his boss as a giving and trusting man, and was openly identified as an outlaw who had been profiled in the local press. Kid Rock did not hide the association. Rather, he surrounded himself with it. The outlaw image ran deeper than one bodyguard, though it never crossed into actual membership. Kid Rock was close to Allan Coe, the country singer who claimed his own ties to the Outlaws Motorcycle Club, and the two collaborated for years, with Coe writing the closing track on Kid Rock's 2003 album. When Coe died in 2026, Kid Rock remembered him as about as real as an outlaw can get, a line that revealed how much he admired exactly the kind of life Coe had claimed to live. Robert Patrick. Robert Patrick has spent his career playing hard men. He was the relentless T-1000 in Terminator 2, an Army colonel in the unit, and a federal agent in the X-Files, an actor whose intensity made him a natural villain. But off-screen, the thing that defines him is not a role, it is a patch. Robert Patrick is a fully patched member of the Booze Fighters Motorcycle Club, and he has been for well over a decade. The way he found the club sounds like something out of one of his films. After finally making money in Hollywood, Patrick bought a Harley-Davidson and fell in love with riding across America, eventually making more than 11 cross-country trips. On one of those early journeys, somewhere around Yellowstone, he and his friends were pulled over for speeding, and afterward they stopped at a diner to eat. A huge older man with a white beard walked in, a genuine booze fighter, and the two recognized each other instantly. They started talking, and that conversation set Patrick on a year-long path of prospecting and riding until he earned his full patch. What makes Patrick different from most of the names tied to motorcycle clubs is the kind of club the Booze Fighters are. They are one of the oldest motorcycle clubs in America, Founded in Los Angeles in 1946 by veterans coming home from World War II, men who drank and fought and rode hard, but who carried the brotherhood and duty they had learned in the war. The booze fighters were even present at the 1947 Hollister rally that birthed the entire outlaw biker myth and inspired the Wild One. But unlike the clubs that grew out of that same moment, the booze fighters never became a one-percenter organization. They are not an outlaw club. Under Patrick, the club leans hard into that legacy. His Chapter 1, 01 in Los Angeles, operates as a non-profit, and he has used his profile to raise money for disabled veterans, children's hospitals, Skid Row toy runs, and Habitat for Humanity. He has carried his colors to Baghdad to visit American troops and ridden in memorial runs for fallen soldiers. For Patrick, the patch is real and the brotherhood is real, but it stands for service rather than crime. He is proof that the three-piece patch and the open road do not always lead where the outlaw legend says they do. Dog the Bounty Hunter. Before he was the most famous bounty hunter in America, Dwayne Chapman was an outlaw biker. At 15 years old, he ran away from home and joined the Devil's Disciples, a genuine outlaw motorcycle club founded in California in the 1960s, and he was a real patched member. He has described getting his patch, riding with the club, and the way the president handed out nicknames to every man who rode with them. The name he earned there is the one the whole world knows him by today: Dog. God spelled backwards, given to him because even surrounded by outlaws, he refused to let anyone disrespect his faith. The club life pulled him straight into the worst moment of his life. In 1976, at 23, Chapman was sitting in a car outside a house in Pampa, Texas, while a friend went inside to rob a marijuana dealer. The friend shot the man, who later died. Chapman never fired a shot, but under Texas law that did not matter, and he was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 5 years in prison. He served 18 months in Huntsville. Prison is where the outlaw became something else. While he was inside, Chapman tackled an inmate who was trying to escape, and a corrections officer threw down a pair of handcuffs and told him to hook the man up, calling him Bounty Hunter. The name and the idea stuck. When he got out, the former Devil's Disciple turned his instincts for tracking and confrontation into a career on the other side of the law, eventually capturing more than 10,000 fugitives and becoming a reality television star. Chuck Zito. There is no better figure to close this list than Chuck Zito, because his life is the complete version of the story that everyone else here only tells a piece of. Zito was a genuine, high-ranking member of the Hells Angels for a quarter of a century, and he became a working Hollywood actor, a celebrity bodyguard, and a television personality. He did not brush against this world, document it, or wrap himself in its myth. He lived at the absolute center of it, and then walked into the entertainment industry, carrying that history openly. Zito was born in the Bronx in 1953, the son of a professional boxer, and he came up fighting in the New York Golden Gloves, winning his first bout by knockout at 17, and compiling an amateur record of 36-5. He founded his own motorcycle club in New Rochelle in the 1970s, which eventually merged with the Ching-a-Ling Nomads, and his involvement in that world cost him early. In 1976, an apartment that had been rented to him was targeted in an arson attack following a dispute tied to his biker club membership, and the following year he was charged with assault after a bar brawl. After years spent around the New York Hells Angels and their chapter president Sandy Alexander, whom he met while they trained at the same Manhattan gym, he was voted into the club in 1979. He did not stay rank and file. He rose to become vice president of the New York City Charter and a founding member and president of the New York Nomads chapter, holding rank for 25 years in one of the most scrutinized outlaw organizations in the world. That loyalty was tested in the most serious way. He served years in federal prison in the late 1980s on a drug conspiracy charge, and he has spoken about refusing to cooperate with a federal investigation into the club, the exact code of silence that defines that world. His path into entertainment ran parallel to all of it. In 1980, he founded a celebrity bodyguard company called Charlie's Angels Bodyguard Services, protecting major stars and building the Hollywood connections that would later put him in front of the camera. He became a recognizable actor, best known for playing the inmate Chucky Pancamo on the HBO prison drama Oz, and for appearing in Carlito's Way and on Sons of Anarchy, where he joined the same cast of real bikers as Labrava and Coons. His reputation for being exactly as dangerous as his characters was cemented in one widely reported 1998 incident at the Manhattan Club Scores, where Zito was out with his friend Mickey Rourke when Rourke's companion, the action star Jean-Claude Van Damme, allegedly made disparaging remarks about Zito to a bouncer. When the comments were relayed back to him, Zito confronted Van Damme and knocked him to the floor, reportedly breaking his own hand in the process. It took the two men 17 years to reconcile. Zito later believed his connection to that world ran even deeper into Hollywood than people realized, filing a lawsuit claiming that the concept for Sons of Anarchy had been taken from a motorcycle club show he had pitched years earlier, a dispute that ultimately tied into his casting on the series. He left the Hells Angels in the mid-2000s to pursue acting full-time and laid out the entire arc in his autobiography, Street Justice. He remains a public figure to this day, his name surfacing again as recently as 2024 when he appeared in a New York courtroom in support of Donald Trump. Zito is the purest example of the thing this whole list is built around, a man who held real rank in the outlaw world and then became famous without ever once having to pretend he was something he was not. The line between a famous face and a real outlaw is harder to cross than almost anyone realizes, and the people on this list sit on every side of it. But the ones who actually earned the patch learned something the celebrities never had to. Loyalty in that world only runs one direction, and it lasts only as long as you are useful. Click the next video to find out what happened to the man who was once Mom Boucher's most feared enforcer when the Hells Angels he had served turned on him completely.